down. All right, so welcome again, everybody, to the Wild Sheep webinar series. Tonight, we're presenting using photography and social media to promote wildlife conservation. We have with us here Chester Moore and Paul Fuzinski, and I will go ahead and let Chester get started. Take it away, Chester.
Thank you, Amanda. It's an honor and privilege for me and my brother Paul to be here and talk about something we're both very passionate about, and that is using photography to promote conservation, specifically through the science-based North American model of conservation that has been so successful in helping restore everything from bison to bighorns. And tell a story to get this started. So I've worked in the wildlife journalism world since I was 19 years old. And I've never had like a real gig. I mean, it's always been doing media of some kind, you know. And I've always thought hunting bighorn would be like the pinnacle of a hunting experience. And I actually got to photograph most of my work was in the Texas and the Southeast and Gulf Coast. And I decided a few years back, like 6 years ago almost now, that I'm going to really pursue the sheep thing, because that's always my heart, was to figure out a way to get involved in doing sheep work. And so we went to Estes Park, Colorado, me and my wife, and I photographed the bighorn you see on the screen now. It's a big, beautiful, well-fed boy right here. And I printed the picture out and gave it to a friend of mine who works in the hunting industry. And I told him, I said, hey, man, I may never get to go hunt one, but man, it was pretty exciting getting that photo. And he looked at me and said, look, if you go back in the ancient Hebrew text, King David snuck into King Saul's tent when he was asleep and cut a piece of his robe. Let him know I could have got you. He said, if you get close enough to do a great photo, the only difference was, you know, you pushed a button on a camera and didn't pull a trigger. So that kind of even opened it up more, the idea of like, photography is almost like going on a hunting trip of sorts, and it can be a huge adventure. And started really tying in the youth work we do with wildlife photography. And so I'm just going to kind of get right into the heart of that. And there's a lot to this. And so here's the same photo that I just took. And you know, everybody that has social media, I mean, it's based around images. It's images and words. And you know, you have Instagram or your TikTok or Facebook or whatever you use. And, you know, I see a lot of great wildlife stuff posted out there, and it's just, hey, check it out. I photographed this. They call it a goat, and it's like a bighorn, Rocky Mountain bighorn, you know. Look at this cool goat I photographed or whatever. And that's what they have. I've even seen the hunters and people I know to post a picture. They may have the species right, but it's like, check out what I did. I'm trying to turn that into getting people to use that as an awareness platform. So here's a really simple example of giving you a little bit of info. Just a little bit can help. So the tagline isn't, hey, I'm Chester, I shot this big ram photo in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's a Rocky Mountain bighorn. Ram stands at 12,000 feet in Rocky Mountain National Park at Estes Park, Colorado. So at least right in the very get-go, simplicity is you told people what species this is. You told them that they're live in high elevations, that they can go see them in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it's located in Estes Park, Colorado. So just in a very simple way, put some identification of what you've done, and all of a sudden you've turned that from being like, hold on, I didn't know we had Rocky Mountain bighorns. I thought all those things were goats or whatever people think. You know, I want to learn more about that. So that turns into a Google search, and maybe they come across the National Bighorn Sheep Center or the Wild Sheep Foundation or something like that. And that's just a very simple way of like taking educated approach to the photography that we do and putting information. We can go way deeper, and that's what I want us to really do. Right here, Rocky Mountain bighorn ram stands at 12,000 feet in Rocky Mountain National Park. The high altitude environment is considered alpine, a unique ecosystem found above the tree line where harsh conditions shape the landscape. The fragile alpine habitat is home to specialized animals such as marmots and pikas that thrive in these conditions. So all of a sudden, you've been able to tell people where it's at, what it is, that it lives in a fragile, unique environment. And it's a little nugget of wildlife education that might spark people a little bit to, you know, to look into that. And Paul, do you have anything to say on this part of it, bud?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and as Chester said, the way you talk about these images is very important. I know a lot of hunters, and I'm a hunter myself. I'm a very avid fly fisherman, and a lot of the time we get so hyped up. We take an animal, we're up on the mountains or we're in the woods or whatever. We post this picture of us with the animal, impactful. Very proud of that moment. But that's a good moment to, on a personal level, to talk
Yep.
about conservation. There's nothing wrong with talk like showing your pride with the animal and all that stuff. That's very necessary. But also talking, like this animal wouldn't be around if it weren't for conservation efforts. Where I
Yep.
live in Ohio, deer were extirpated for, my
Yeah.
dad growing up, there were no deer in Ohio. And now
Mhm.
we have more deer than we know what to do with. Deer hunting here is great. And just like it doesn't have to be an essay on the statistics of deer population movements across the country. It could be, hey, I got this deer. I'm very proud, harvest it, feed my family. And, I'm just glad that conservation efforts have been put in place and the North American models here to make sure that these animals are around for everybody to enjoy. Simple as that. You don't need to write an essay. So, I 100% agree with what Chester's saying. And I think just those little tidbits are important because to me, the North American model isn't talked about enough on a personal level and an organizational level with a lot of places I see. And I think it's very much important to get that message out.
And this is where we're going to dive a little deeper into like promoting that hunt model and the hunter-based conservation part. And one of the things I like to do in a photo is to highlight the habitat, because without the habitat, you don't have wildlife. You got to have big chunks of good quality habitat, and that's what you see in this photo. So there is about to be a desert bighorn translocation from Elephant Mountain in Alpine, Texas, to a place that hasn't had bighorns in 100 years in the Franklin Mountains near El Paso, Texas. This is the very tip top of Elephant Mountain where I was standing, and it's on this high plateau at about 6,000 feet. And right behind it is the Chihuahuan Desert. So it shows that break that these animals are living up in the high desert, and you can tell people about that. But what's even more important here is being able to tell a story behind the scenes here. And like I say in this particular caption that I put, desert bighorn sheep in an Elephant Mountain Wildlife Management Area, hunter conservationists are directly responsible for the return of this species to Texas through the foundation of the Texas Bighorn Society and sort of support a group like the Wild Sheep Foundation. And this is where you throw the little bit of in that's kind of like even the skeptic will be like, whoa, that's cool. In fact, the hunter who owned Elephant Mountain donated the property to Texas Parks and Wildlife solely for the conservation and propagation of desert bighorn sheep. So, being able to go in and, you're referring back to hunters, and that, there's this funding goes through and donations, and it helps build that because, most people are non-hunters, and they're not anti-hunters or hunters, they're non-hunters. And being able to communicate to them that you have a reverence for this great animal, and telling them some details of how conservation went. And like I said, Paul said, it doesn't have to be an essay, you know, it's just got to be something that grabs their attention and points back to conservation. Because my interest in sheep came from, this is the craziest thing, sitting in my dad's lap when I was a little boy and cutting out pictures from outdoor magazines like Sports Afield and making scrapbooks. And I had a scrapbook, and there was from a Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine, and it was, it was an older magazine. It was about 10 years before I got it in like 85 or something. And it said 1976. It said white-tailed deer in Texas, 3 million, wild turkeys, 300,000, desert bighorn sheep, 40. And I remember going, whoa, why don't we have more sheep? And there wasn't the internet, but I always thought, man, it would be cool if sheep were something you could help out. And a few years later, I win an essay when I was a senior in high school by Texas Parks and Wildlife, and I won a lifetime hunting and fishing license writing about hunting as conservation. And they had this big expo, and the first booth I run into is a group called the Texas Bighorn Society, and they were doing sheep conservation work. And all of that interest in that went back to cutting out photos and media. And the first conservation group I ever joined was the Texas Bighorn Society because of a clipping from an outdoor magazine. Well, now it used to have to be a publisher or maybe even like a writer like me to have the access to put that out. Now through social media, we can all be empowered to get the word out, whether your heart is education through the National Bighorn Sheep Center, referencing the great work you do, whether it's the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation or the Wild Sheep Foundation itself, or the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance or National Wild Turkey Federation. There's all these great ways that anyone now can put information out that really makes a big difference. Paul?
Yeah, and to tag in on that, I think anytime we promote anything media centric with wildlife, it's a great opportunity to push people to those organizations that
Mhm.
you really believe in and that are important to you. Like at every video I make, whether it's in the middle, the end, whatever, I always am talking about you can get involved, because the reality is not every single person's going to donate money or come into an event and give time or whatever. But if they can get a membership to the Wild Sheep Foundation, National Bighorn Sheep Center, something along those lines, National Wild Turkey Federation, if you join those organizations, you're pushing people to be up to date on conservation issues. It's
Yep.
usually what, $35 a year for pretty much across the board from every organization I'm part of. It's a great opportunity for them to stay informed, to be up on issues, to learn about the politics of this, and they're helping fund like people in doing the big work and lobbying and going against, the stuff that's harming conservation and harming wildlife. And that's a simple thing we can all do. Like, hey, this is a cool picture of a sheep I took on vacation. If you want sheep to be around, join the Wild Sheep Foundation. Simple, easy, and those
Yep.
organizations are going to push conservation way further than you or I or any most people can, because they're organized and they do great work. So yeah, absolutely, Chester. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And to add to what Paul said is the fact that a lot of people just don't know how to take that initial step. So by putting a link out there to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Wild Sheep Foundation, whatever, Trout Unlimited, whatever your cause is in this world, you give them a really easy on-ramp to go further. And that one person, and that we'll talk more about how don't ever think you have a small voice. We'll talk more about that later, but that one person you turn on to that might be the next person who has a fundraising gift that can do unbelievable work, or is a really brainy scientist who can figure out a way to deal with Mycoplasma pneumoniae, the pathogen that hurts bighorns. And it's all, whether we're talking conservation or just awareness, it's all like an educational opportunity. And I wanted to show these beasts. Of course, I wasn't hunting when I took this picture. It was, these beasts, these giant elk near Estes Park are hanging out by the road, and one of the things I never assume, and I don't think any of us should ever assume that any of our audience knows anything about wildlife. We should always assume that, we shouldn't treat them like dummies, of course, but like putting out some basic information can be a big help and be a conversation starter. And the example of this is I put this photo out on my Instagram and talked about how, these guys were, they're in velvet, they're getting close to hard antler here another 6 weeks or so after this photo was taken. And someone messaged me, what does hard antler mean? So the next post I went and made was this. I said, same area, just that was a year before, about 6 or 8 weeks down the line. And every year deer shed their antlers. And a lot of general public people who may want to get into some of this don't know that. So any little tidbit that someone can share about wildlife like that is always a valuable thing. And I think it's very empowering to people to be able to learn and know, and then for all of us to be approachable enough to just give them an educated answer, because there's always someone smarter than all of us, no matter how smart we think we are. And we want to have a very openness to the public. And because I can guarantee you the people that are against that North American science-based, hunting-based conservation model, they're pretty open to people. And we want to be a light to this stuff, and to tell little stories. Another thing is I like to tell little funny stories. So The truth behind this story is I had this particular stretch of road. I was on a deadline for some turkey photos, and I needed Rio Grande gobblers in full action. And another photographer friend of mine, man, we decided to go on this trip because I think you're off, man. I've driven this road 50 times and never seen a turkey. I said, I've driven it 150 and I've seen 150 turkeys. And about the time he says that, he looks over and goes, he slams on the brakes. You were right. And so these guys are on the side of a fence, right? They're over here. And I'm going, what are they looking at? And I look on right where I'm out of the car, there are two hens behind a bush. And, you know, turkeys can fly. But I watched these gobblers for 15 minutes running up and down that fence, trying to figure out how to find a hole to get under it. And I hid behind the bush and just stuck my camera through and shot a bunch of pictures. I got this beautiful photo, right? And but that was a fun story. Two Rio Grande gobblers have a dispute over on the other side of the fence. They chose to fight instead of fly over because they kept getting little scraps over. Like, I'm getting her first. No, you know, whatever was going on in their turkey brains. And I put in 1973, there are around 1 million turkeys in the U.S. Now there are 7 million thanks to hunter-based conservation efforts, including groups like the National Wild Turkey Federation. So fun little tidbit. Your personal story, like, you know, maybe you're in Grand Teton and you have at a safe distance, you photograph a beautiful grizzly, you know, and it's the first time you saw a grizzly. Share how you felt, and that, you know, this great land that was conserved by visionaries, you know, Teddy Roosevelt and all the early pioneers of the national park system gave us a place to be able to have those experiences. And I think a lot of people want to be educated, but it's also, you know, pretty inspirational. And Paul and I talked about that with like the filmmaking part and videography. You want to touch a little bit on that part of it, Paul?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of important to add. I always like to touch on, especially with when you're talking turkeys and you're talking elk, deer, all these big animals. When you talk about extirpation, a lot of people had no idea that these animals were ever at that point. And it's
Yep.
a real easy talking point to bring up to get people interested. Because when you say, if I talk to someone my age in Ohio and I said, did you know that, you know, in your parents' lifetime, there were almost no deer in Ohio? They wouldn't believe you because it's so ridiculous because the amount of deer we have here is so high that they can't imagine that. And you say, yes, this is due to hunter conservation efforts. And I think it's very important to just like these little things that most of us know as, you know, just a factual thing. Like, why would anybody not know that? The general public doesn't know because they're not following wildlife like a lot of us who are passionate about wildlife are. And in a filmmaking sense, you know, you want to give people cool information, cool facts, but you also want to make it interesting and
Mhm.
fun. And, you know, talking about conservation can be a little glum sometimes when you start talking numbers and stuff, but you want to keep it exciting for people and focus on, I think for me, I found that focusing on the animals themselves and cool animal stuff. I shot some stuff about elk in California, elk on the beach. I had no idea until I saw them. Elk live on the beach in California, apparently. And it was just a cool fact that I didn't know and that people loved it. So it's just cool stuff like that that's easy to weave in. Maybe something you learn that's really important. People love that stuff. That's why Disney makes 1 million animal movies every year because people love wildlife. So
Yep.
just keep that in mind if you ever post anything on social media. It's that simple. It's not, you don't have a director telling me to write 50 hours worth of script rewrites to do this stuff. I just go what interests me and post it, and people seem to like it.
Yeah, like if you're doing a video, you know, there's nothing wrong with being like super overly enthusiastic. Enthusiasm sells. You know, when I was growing up, there were a lot of fishing TV shows, and most of them were horrible because there'd be some guy that would catch like a 12-pound bass, and he'd be like, "Well, Earl, caught a 12-pound bass. There he is." Yet the great Bill Dance was like jumping up and down and falling out the boat. And who do we remember? Remember that guy because his heart came out, you know, and I think that's part of that is having that deep heart for wildlife and fun part. And I think that's always a part. And that can be in your words, it can be in you know, just a video or whatever you're doing. And I think, you know, keeping the enthusiasm level up is don't be ashamed of that. Passion is what the key is having a passion for it. I mean, if you look at that gobbler there, I mean, he is pretty passionate about finding, he wants that girl across. So those two hens over there, but He just got too caught up in the distraction of the actual fence, which was not very tall. So, yeah, it was great. I had someone ask me, and that's a really killer. Like, how far did you have to go out in the middle of nowhere? And that's another thing. You don't have to go very far sometimes. I'm like, oh, I just stopped on the side of the road and found a bush to get behind until he got close to me. But that's part of it, is being able. Me and Paul have been working on like higher quality wildlife, the elevation, in the one that we did for the National Bighorn Sheep Center, and one we're working on for Yellowstone. It was the marriage of these images that we were capturing, but also, storytelling. Not just facts, but like a story that we're telling. And your story might be a couple of sentences, but you tell a story, or you might have this thing happen and people understand that. I think that's a missing ingredient in all the stuff we're doing out there. Paul, had you seen that photo before, these turkeys?
I have not seen this photo. No, that's a really good
It's
photo.
one out of my archives. It's a personally favorite one of mine because of the story behind it, but I shot that thing 5 years ago and it still makes me smile. And that's, I think that's an important part of all this is that. So let me see here. All right. This is where I specialize in anomalies sell. Okay. So one of the things is that you're competing with a lot of stuff out there, and sometimes you'll see something a little bit different in nature. And you may think, oh, that's really cool. That's just that's just a white turkey. They got a lot of white turkeys at the farm down the road from the house. Well, yeah, that's a domestic breed. This is a smoke phase Eastern wild turkey hen that I photographed last year in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I mean, it's a great photo. It's composed well, et cetera, et cetera. But it is among turkey people, this is like huge, a color phased bird. And then when you tell people that, wild turkeys are what you pretty much see, they're the brown and black with the red head critter you see running around gobbling. And you show something like this, it really grabs people's attention. So if you have anything slightly unusual or different or a behavior that might be a little bit different, that stuff right there has a really big impact on terms of audience. I always noticed that my photos and stories as well on wildlife that's a little bit different or some kind of a behavior of wildlife that was unusual. I mean, how many people lately have seen the bear coming up to the screen door in Florida and the dog responding to it, right? That stuff, it connects with people. And this is another one right here. This is like my favorite turkey photo I've ever taken because this is a smoke phase. No, it's a cinnamon phase, excuse me, which is rarer than the smoke phase. Taken at 9,000 feet in Estes Park, Colorado. Hen with a beard. Most hens don't have beards. Some do. And her pulse, if you look close enough, you see the pulse there. And I posted this one. This was 5 years ago as well. And I remember a lot of turkey hunters started shared all over the turkey circuit because I just, was hashtagging all the turkey stuff and tagged the National Wild Turkey Federation. But what really was interesting to me was just people who weren't like turkey hunters were excited about the little babies when I noted in the caption that there were babies there because it told a story. Here's mom out there with her baby. She's a rarity. She's super rare. I've heard 1 in 500,000 potentially born this, that come out of an egg this color to make it to adulthood. Who knows? And here she is. And, the discussion was stuff like, I wonder if she passed on her genes. I wonder if those going on. And that got people just talking and talking and talking about this. So matter of fact, it's really weird on Instagram in particular. Most of the time when I post on Facebook, I'll get the initial week of stuff. But on Instagram, people will pick up stuff 2 years later sometimes. And I've had that happen a couple of times with this particular photo where I started getting comments and stuff. But it was because I opened it up with some information about, thing. And I actually mentioned the fact that I had just photographed a moose about a half mile down the road from this, and we were at 9,000 feet. So I even had some turkey people who were like, dude, I live in, Georgia. I didn't think they had turkeys at 9,000 feet, that kind of stuff. So those kind of things are always interesting. And Paul, from on the film side of let's talk about capturing some of the behavior moments and things, because I know you're always looking for that deer to do that lick its lips, or some kind of a thing to catch attention.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about, filming, especially we all have, the most powerful tool in the world in our pocket right here.
Yeah.
Not everything needs to be shot in, 8K, 120 frames a second. A lot of this
Yeah.
stuff is very interesting to people because again, not when you look at things statistically in America, most people are moving to be in urban environments and they're not seeing this stuff. So any wildlife action is a great moment to talk about conservation. I used to be a naturalist at a park system when I graduated from college briefly, and one of the things that they taught us was you might not be that interested in a squirrel. A squirrel's a squirrel to you. You've seen 10,000
Mhm.
squirrels out here. But to the kid coming from the public school district that you're giving a tour, they may have never seen a squirrel. They may have never seen a deer. They may never have seen any of this wildlife, raccoons, anything. So any opportunity to share wildlife, whether it's a reel, whether it's a vertical, horizontal video, I don't think the format matters. I think that as long as you're taking a photo and sharing it and getting people interested in it on whatever platform you like, you don't have to post on 18 different platforms like I do because that's my job. You have to find something interesting, talk about it. Your family and friends learning about this stuff is going to do a lot more because they know you, they can talk to you about it. They might even disagree with you about it, but it's always a good opportunity to make a case for conservation, and especially the hunting side. We don't need people to hunt necessarily all the time. We need people to not be against us as hunters, anglers, fishermen, because that's where the
Yep.
conservation money is coming from. So this is an important tool, filming that unique stuff that you see. If you see a deer, licking a branch during the rut or something, most people don't know they do that. Most people don't know they make scrapes. Most people don't know they do any of this stuff. And to them, it's a great teaching moment to teach about wildlife. And therefore, if they like the wildlife, they're going to start caring about conservation down the road. Hopefully, that's always my perspective.
Yeah, and you mentioned not having to be a pro at it. I mean, I am a pro at it, and my wife stuck her phone outside the window in our beloved Estes Park area, and we were on a city corner where they had a couple of acres and a lot, and I mean the afterbirth was over in the bushes a few feet away. We just saw this beautiful moment, and I mean, what a conservation story right here. The fact that you have so many elk in America, and Yellowstone was the last hope of elk back in the turn of the when at the time that North American model in the early 1900s was starting to be founded and all of those things. And here's this beautiful moment. This would never win an award. It's not going to be the cover of a magazine or probably even a spread, but it's a beautiful just shot moment. And you don't have to be a pro to do that. So, and another thing is there's a lot of snooty people online that do photography and stuff. And they always, if it doesn't look like something that would win a National Geographic contest, they're snooty about it. But you know what? They're miserable. Don't worry about them. Just post it for the rest of us who love what you're sharing. And we just want to really empower you to do this because we're just a
Mhm.
couple of knuckleheads that happen to find a way to make, somewhat of a living working in this industry. And we want people to be able to see moments like that. I mean, I was almost in tears seeing that. I'd never been that close to that young of a baby elk before, and it just been born. And here's this loving mom taking care of it, and it's just another one of those moments to tell people about this great resource. And um, it's really, I think, key to, like we both said, you don't have to be a pro. You just got to have a heart for it and maybe get yourself educated on just a few things about these animals and how science-based management that involves hunting and fishing and all these wonderful fundraising sources are keeping this alive, making sure that we have wild ground, wild places, and wildlife. And man, I can't imagine my life without it. I mean, when I won that first essay that started my entire career when I was a senior, I quoted Henry David Thoreau, and wildness is the preservation of the world, and it certainly has been in my world. I mean, the fact that we can do this and communicate with people, but everyone can. And think about all the voices just to be on here and see this in the archives on YouTube and say, hey, you know what? I've got some pretty cool shots from Grand Teton, or I was down on the Everglades and I saw some, some key deer in the Keys or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, a lot more people are getting intentional about being wildlife centric and conservation centric. And when we can get hundreds of thousands of people intentionally talking about science-based conservation, sharing out there, I think we can turn the tide on a few negative things that are happening and create an opportunity for more people to really step up and support what's going on out there.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I would say one of my favorite images that I've ever captured is when I was in Yellowstone. We're driving, if you've ever been there, there's multiple entrances. We're at the north entrance, driving up the steep road that takes you to Mammoth Hot Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, right outside basically the visitor center, I whipped my buddy was driving the car and I was like, stop, there's an elk. And this bird had landed on its back. And I threw out my camera out. I literally hanging out the window of a, little tiny rental car shooting this. The little bird lands on the elk's butt, essentially. The elk spins its head around, looks at the bird, licks the bird, and the bird flies off. And I said, that might have been the coolest wildlife shot I've ever taken in my life. Even if it never makes it into anything, wildlife do weird things. Any of you who ever spend any time outside, that. You watch wildlife and you're like, these things are goofy. They do strange things. Like and that stuff is very interesting to people. That's a little mini story in and of itself. Did you know that an elk would lick the bird landing on its back? And that's, that kind of stuff can get attention. It's really not that hard to find cool stuff like that. It happens every day. How many weird times have you been in a deer's blind or out hunting in the backcountry or just on vacation at one of these wild places and you've seen stuff and you're like, geez, wildlife is just so cool. And sharing that with the world is important in this day and age because it's a plus and a minus. The social media thing is ever present and it's not going away anytime soon. And I think a lot of people push back against it, whereas we could be using this for good to combat a lot of the negativity that goes on social media. I see, and there's a lot of, internal bickering about, issues here and there in the hunting world and the conservation world and the fishing world and all this stuff. You have the power to use it for good. You don't have to, listen to that stuff. A, you can tune it out, and B, you can kind of be that shining light in the darkness. I don't really get into the politics of that kind of stuff. I just try and put out good information, cool animal stuff, and I think that goes a lot further because people are tired of hearing it,
Yeah, exactly. And I'm here because my dad took me outdoors and I saw images of wildlife. I wanted to go see an elk and a bighorn sheep and catch a rainbow trout, and that gave me some very positive things to aspire to. And that's kind of what I want to round up before we go into Q&A here. It's about the idea of inspiring others. This is a photo I took in Colorado, and I actually went back and we basically measured this location. This ram jumped up, that's about 8 feet from the ground there, and just grabbed that with his hooves. And then the next shot, he was all the way up. I mean, how incredible of an animal is that? That was on the cover of my book called Higher Calling. And it just, look at the muscles and the design. It's such an incredible thing. And, one common theme when I deal with people, no matter where they're at from a socioeconomic background or whether they're, from America or maybe they're friends of mine in Europe or whatever, when you go into wild places, there's less stress. It's calm, it's beauty, and there's awe, and it reminds us of the great things in life. And things can be not, no matter how blessed you are in life, life's tough, and we can use these moments and places to inspire other people, and I wanted to show a prime example of that right here. This little girl right here, she was 2 years old. She couldn't walk or talk. She weighed 16 pounds at 26 months old, had cerebral palsy. By the grace of God, little girl started walking and talking. And then last August, this little girl was at 14,130 feet on Mount Blue Sky, used to be Mount Evans, and one of my favorite places. And she took this awesome photo of a Rocky Mountain goat. She photographed that goat for like 30 minutes up high on a rock. And that little girl won award of merit to the Assemblies of God and beat out 280 other entries to win the one national award of merit for photography. And that little girl is my daughter. And we wanted to let you know that no matter what challenge you may have or others have, it's life is better out there, and you don't have to be from a privileged background or have some great skill set. You just got to have the heart and the determination. No one would have thought little Faith Moore that we adopted when she was 2 from China would ever walk, much less do this. And by the grace of God, she has. But one of the things I want to share is that you can help other people. If you have a gift, maybe you're someone on here that already is like really tuned in as a great photographer, or maybe ecotourism or maybe you're a part-time fly fishing guide. You can help other people get into the wild and have an incredible life. Paul, this documentary he won the award for, it's called Higher Colony Wildlife the Elevation. And this little girl here is from Fort Collins, Colorado. Her name is Juno. And Juno had cancer. When I met her the year before, we did a very special thing through our ministry outreach for her. She wanted to meet a sloth, and she couldn't walk. Then we walked around near her home, and took her to photograph the prairie dog towns there. And then we got to take her out into Rocky Mountain National Park. And if you look real close right there, you'll see the hind end of a mule deer. And she got to photograph a mule deer. And she took this really cool photo of a bull elk. And that bull elk is now in the Texas National Wild Turkey Federation's annual calendar. And she's got a publication credit. So you got a kid that's going through something like photography can be a great and easy thing to get. They don't have to go into Teton or the Everglades or Big Bend. They can go to the bird feeder in the backyard, and they don't even have to have a camera. They've already got one, and they can shoot photos and they can post them. They can be part of this, and you can let them know that even the young ones cannot be the next generation, but the now generation of doing conservation. And one thing I wanted to offer is that our Higher Calling Wildlife media platform, which is our annual magazine, my blog, and my social media, if you have photos that your kids have taken of wildlife that they would like to put out there, I would be glad to help publish them. So you can contact me, go to highercalling.net, my blog, at the Chester Moore on Instagram. Amanda knows how to get a hold of me. The National Bighorn Sheep Center does, and would like to be, because your kids can really get some skin in the game on this, and they will probably be teaching us how to do this correctly very, very soon. Matter of fact, my daughter's already trying to give me pointers after winning the dang contest. So she's like trying to give me all this stuff. I'm like, hey, hold on, kid, but it's an empowering thing to get to do this, and we just wanted to share that with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chester and Paul. I encourage you all now to, if you want to share your video, your screen, that's great, or just unmute yourself, and we're opening it up to Q&A questions now.
Or you can throw them in the chat too if you don't want to
Yep.
pop on the screen.
And I really appreciate, Chester, you sharing that story too about your daughter. And I mean, just what a wonderful story. And maybe share a little bit about what you did with the Sheep Center in Yellowstone National Park this summer. That was pretty amazing.
So our outreach, we have a program called Wild Wishes within Higher Calling Wildlife that we grant wildlife encounters for kids who are going through stuff. And it started off with terminally ill children and parental and sibling loss, but we even work with girls that have been through sex trafficking now. And we granted our 253rd wish a few weeks ago. And Amanda was kind enough to partner with us and help us find some kids in the Du Bois area that maybe were having a tough time lately. And we got to take them out into Yellowstone. And my brother Paul here we're working on the documentary right now. And we took them into my favorite place in Yellowstone, of course, the Lamar Valley. And we had pronghorns so close it probably wasn't legal. They just kind of walked up to us almost, like, but they got to see grizzlies and they got to see tons of bison and they got to see ospreys and they got to see one of them got to see a wolf. And my buddy Andy was the really blessed one because the only bighorns we saw with Andy. We saw two ewes up on a coming down a hill right there in by the river down the Lamar Valley. And so we filmed that. We let those kids do photography. And then what I did, I went and we ordered them high quality prints of all their best photos and had them mailed to them. And they're going to be in the 5th annual edition of Higher Calling Wildlife Magazine in a special Yellowstone edition. And we had this lovely, amazing young girl named Vivian that didn't get to go in the field with us, but Vivian loved wolves. And so we threw her a wolf party and gave her a bunch of wolf merch and hung out with her at the National Bighorn Sheep Center. So also, if anyone ever knows of a kid, because we're coming back next year, we're coming back in 2025, that we might be able to help and do something like that, please reach out to me because that's what we're all about.
Absolutely. And any thoughts, Chester, on, if you have like a nicer camera, if you're not really skilled with, cameras and taking videos and taking pictures, just any suggestions on what cameras to get or
Paul,
the
you want to take that one, bud?
Yes.
You
Sure.
want to take that one, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. So there's many, many, many budget cameras on the market right now that are fantastic. I mean, if you got $500 laying around, you can get $700. You can get a very good camera for photography or video. You can go to your local, whatever big box store, Amazon. You can look up a kit. Nikon makes great cameras. Sony makes great cameras. Canon makes great cameras. They all take photos. And really, I started out on I think I paid $700 for the kit, and it came with a 300 mm zoom lens, which in the world of photography is like not super far, especially wildlife photography. Your average wildlife photographer is probably rocking a 600 mm, which is those big lenses you always see people at the parks with.
Yep.
I took, not only did I become a better photographer and videographer with a smaller lens, because it's just like hunting. You have to learn how to get closer to the animal to get the same photo the guy's a quarter mile away with. But I think there's no limitations right now. Phones are doing great jobs. I mean, I know they're not taking the the super close-up wildlife photos, but if you have a few $100s laying around, the camera I'm on right now, I think I paid $700 for, and it darn near fits in my pocket. And you can take amazing quality photos with it. Any starter kit is going to do good. Some of the most powerful tools I have in my kit are the undestructible
GoPros.
GoPros. They are
Yep.
amazing. You can literally fit them on anything. For wildlife, they're great. You can leave them close to something and walk away for a while and come back. And if there's wildlife near, there's so much. We're in a very, I wouldn't be able to do my job right now if this was 10 years ago. The startup costs now to do this stuff are so low. For a personal level, at a hobby level, it's affordable. For an organizational level, if you have even a little bit of a budget, cameras are so cheap now. Um, you don't need to like understand all the world-class photographer stuff to
Oh,
be able
no,
to do
definitely
this
not.
stuff now. I speak a lot about organizational levels and doing a lot of this stuff in-house because we all know it's expensive. Video is expensive, audio is
Yeah, for
expensive.
sure.
If you can do things in-house with a phone, with a cheap camera, with some GoPros,
Yep.
quality doesn't matter on social media anymore. I'm afraid to say it, but I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot as that's what I do for my job. But as an organization, you can really put out great content and informational content. And one thing that, aside from photography and video, one thing we haven't touched on that Chester and I both do is podcasting
Yeah.
at an organizational and a personal level. I started my podcast just because I'm interested in the outdoors. I didn't have
Yep.
anything. I just bought some microphones.
Mhm.
I think at a level of speed and flexibility, a podcast is the greatest, simplest tool that an organization or a person can do to get a message out there because there are free podcasting platforms. You can pay $0 and pump out podcasts left and right, and
Mhm.
you can literally buy You can use your phone to record it. You can
Yeah.
buy a startup little thing that costs $100, a little handheld microphone that records directly to itself. If you have, everybody thinks podcasts have to be 3 hours. We're not Joe
No,
Rogan. I put out
no.
10-minute podcasts every week,
And
15
we don't
minutes.
have
If I
his
talk to
budget
some,
for sure.
yeah. I'll talk to someone. If I talk to someone that's interesting to me or very interesting, knows a lot about the North American model, it can go an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. Totally free form. If you're an organization or a person, you want to get a message out, plop down a microphone, upload it 5 minutes after you're done, half hour a week. You get a direct message that you can send out in your newsletters. You can put on
Yep.
your YouTube channel. You can put on a podcasting platform for literally 2 weeks worth of lunch money or something. It is very affordable. And
Hmm.
I think that is where I would direct most people to start from a media perspective, is to get started with podcasting. You're not going to get 1 million followers tomorrow, but it will reach a message and it won't cost you much. And you can add video and photography into that. You can use your pictures if you put it on YouTube or something
Yep.
to elaborate a
That's
point. So I wanted
And
to,
that's what I was going to mention, that option of like putting the podcast on YouTube, because you can go image centric and add a little bit of that. And the other part of that is all the younger people, the young are very savvy to all of these media platforms, and it won't take long to do it. And the thing I like about a podcast is you don't have to, the whole thing about being a journalist, I don't need to be an expert in Euro nymphing for brown trout to write a dang good article or do an interview on it. I just need to talk to the expert. So it could almost be an educational journey, even for like a homeschool family, to have a wildlife podcast, because they can interview all these people and they're getting information, but by sharing it with others, they're spreading a conservation message. So it's a great, great, great way to do that. Uh, I have a radio program and I have 2 other podcasts that I do because I'm insane. I have to do too much work. But I've been doing the radio thing for 25 years, since I was basically a kid, and it's been a cool journey, because that turned into a radio broadcast as well as it being a podcast, and it reaches a lot of people. And it's a great medium, like I said, for a family to start up something like that, even just to be able to learn a lot and log what they learn and share it with the world.
And I'd like to add that I know this is a dirty word nowadays, but you can use the tools available to you for very cheaply with AI, with ChatGPT. People hate it, but one of the as a solo guy doing a lot of work, I can take a podcast, put it into YouTube. YouTube will automatically generate subtitles, and you can put that into ChatGPT for $0, and it will pull out all the relevant points, and you can write an article based off all the key points you talked about with very minimal work. You don't have to listen to the full hour interview you did with someone. You can say, "Hey, this guy, I remember he talked about this topic. Pull all these points out for me, list them as bullet points, and write something about that." You can generate articles for your organizations or your
Yeah.
personal blogs or your personal Facebooks, whatever, through your own. That's why I always, push people to podcasting, because with one piece of material, you can get so much other stuff. I'm like not the greatest writer in the world, but I use these tools available to me to help get my points out from a podcast. My strong point is interviewing. That's what I've went to school for in anthropology and things like that. I learned how to interview people. And it helps, those tools help you get a podcast, you get social media content if you video the podcast, and then you get articles that you can put on your blogs, because we all need that stuff at an organizational level to keep the machine running, to keep people informed. And I think if more people start realizing this, there's a lot of gatekeeping out there about this material. We can make a really big impact at our own stuff on organizational levels, on, big platform levels. It's very doable, and something I tell people every day. You might get discouraged. Everybody wants to be a social media celebrity now. Sometimes you post stuff, it gets 100 views. If you post 10 posts that get 100 views, that's 1,000 views. If you post 100 posts over a year and they're all getting that adds up. That's a very big reach that you're getting organically. And
Yep.
then if you have a few bucks at a personal or organizational level, 10
Hmm.
bucks on YouTube is, I mean, you're talking thousands of people, whereas 10 bucks to a radio station, they're going to be like, we can't help you. You go to a TV station, they're going to say we need, $5 grand to run an ad. You can pick what you want on YouTube specifically, or Facebook or Instagram. Say, I got $100 laying around. I'm going to put it on this video that I think this issue is very important on YouTube. $100 on YouTube, you're guaranteed to get at least 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 views, depending on how it works algorithmically, how organically it
Yep.
shares, and that'll get you more subscribers. That's what I do for a living. I help people grow their stuff like that. That's what I do full time. And advertising on these platforms is much cheaper than traditional advertising. So social media doesn't have to be a bad word. I know it has a bad connotation, but if you think about it as a platform for getting a message
Yep.
out, it changes your
Yep.
viewpoint. It's not for kids on TikTok looking at cool, funny videos. It's a way to spread a message cheaply and effectively with no budget, essentially. So that's kind of the big takeaway I hope a lot of people get, that you can make these impacts to a lot of people very cheaply.
And the other side of that is, one of the things is I want to mention is blogging. My blogs, you would think with podcasting and YouTube and all that, that the written word would be in the dustbin, but I am getting more traction on my blog than I've ever gotten in my entire life. Because there are people who are wanting deeper dives on the reading side. Some people are more bent to go read and stuff like that. And simply getting like a WordPress blog and setting it up, or even if you're like a GoDaddy website, there is a blog option for most websites that's really cheap. I recommend, if you're doing a WordPress, but there's all kind of free blog options as well. And if you like the photography part and you can write, the combination of photography and the written word is what has allowed me to have a career. Because now you can take the deep dive story on that, and your social media posts can lead them to your blog, and your blog can tell the full story. And it also may have a fundraising pitch for a conservation group or your organization. And I'm telling you right now, I have never had as much traffic on my written word stuff than I have now. And I'm doing work for, the stuff I do with Text Fish and Game, Wild Sheep Foundation, people. There's a demand in terms of, I think people want to read longer stuff. Like I'm getting asked to do longer stories than I've ever been asked before. And even just different things I'm doing, like the Coastal Conservation Association. I write for them a couple times a year, and they've upped the length of their feature stories from 1,000 words to 1,500 words. They went the opposite direction because people do. Like, you think about Joe Rogan podcast, he'll like 3 hours and they'll talk about everything. But there's a place in writing for people who like to write for that as well. It can be a short post, a real deep dive. I like to take my deep dives and break them into multiple parts, so I get more people coming back and checking with my stuff and engaging with my content. And blogging is also a very powerful way to put a conservation message out there as well. And you can check my blog out, highercalling.net. It's got about 8 years of archives on it. You just see some of the different things I do. Right now it's a lot of promoting my podcast. My paying gigs have been taking up my writing time, which is great. But my personal blog I've neglected a little bit. But it's also, like I said, I promote my podcast on my blog, and you can collect subscribers, email subscribers to this. So think about the coolness of this for a younger generation, even, that someone can take a podcast platform or a blog or a YouTube channel, and if they have the right mindset and the right mentorship, can create an audience for this very specific part of wildlife that they love and appreciate, and they can have an impact now. And I think that's an awesome thing.
And I want to add, before we wrap up, the best value I've ever found in written word was at the National Bighorn Sheep Center. They had that awesome book about every bighorn sheep in North America, and they had it on sale for $5. I
Yes.
love that book. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was going to be like $50 because those books are never cheap, and I got that there for $5. I did barely squeezed it in my flight home bag, but I made it. So thank you guys for having that available. I love that book.
Yeah, that's a great book. It's a great book.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes. So thank you both. Really appreciate everything that you're doing. I think our youth are so important. So whether you're getting them a camera, encouraging them to get out there, just take pictures, experience nature, wildlife. I mean, they're the future, right? They're the future of our wild places and our wild lands. And, without them, it's just, this is really special. It's really important to protect our conservation education, I think is number one. For sure, at least in our world. So also get to the gift shop and here at the National Bighorn Sheep Center, visit us if you haven't, get some Christmas gifts. We're running some sales right now. So really,
Check it out. I got my, it's a little cool in here actually tonight. It cooled down. I got my National Bighorn Sheep Center shirt on under my hoodie.
excellent.
So,
All right.
got flying the Merc for my friends.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it, Chester. Paul, thank you so much. Join us for our next Wild Sheep webinar series on December 11th. Content to be announced. We're going to have horn size and hunting, another one coming up. We're going to have some discussions and some talk about some wild plants, non-native plants out there that are poisonous to sheep, some domestic testing. So just a lot of really good stuff for our Wild Sheep webinar series. And if you have any ideas or thoughts or content, reach out to us, education@bighorn.org, or give us a call, stop by the center. We just appreciate you all. It's all about the partnerships and the people making our wild places just really special. So thank you.
Honor and privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank
All
you all
right.
very much.